Chapter 22 of The Copper Princess. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Betsy Bush. October 2009. The Copper Princess by Kirk Munroe. Chapter 22. The Signal is Changed. Peveril had been amazed and disgusted at the sudden turning about and departure of the boat that had so nearly effected his rescue. Of course, on recognizing the oarsmen, he understood why they declined to help him, though it did not enter his mind that they regarded him as a supernatural being. "What cowards they are!" he reflected bitterly. "They are determined to kill me, though, that is evident, and I don't believe they will be content with simply leaving me here to die of exposure. It's more than likely they will roll rocks down on me from the cliffs during the night. There's a cheerful prospect to contemplate, with darkness already coming on, too. That young fellow seemed willing enough to help me, only he was bound to do it in his own way. But now I suppose those wretches will prevent him from making any more efforts in my behalf. What is he doing with that gang of murderers, I wonder? Apparently he is about as far removed from that class as a person can be. Well, that's neither here nor there. The one thing to be considered just now is, how am I to get out of this fix? I wonder if there is any possibility of that cord bearing my weight." The cord thus referred to was the one by which the basket of food had been lowered. As it still hung close at hand, Peveril gave it a sharp pull. Although it yielded slightly, it did not break, and, encouraged by this, he threw his whole weight on it as a conclusive test of its strength. The result was sudden, surprising, and well nigh disastrous. The cord gave way so readily that Peveril sprawled at full length on the rocks, while, at the same time, something heavy fell with a rush down the face of the cliff and struck with great force close beside his head. Springing to his feet in alarm at this most unexpected happening, the prisoner found to his amazement, and also to his delight, that he had pulled down the derrick tackle by which he had descended. To be sure, the block at its lower end had very nearly dashed out his brains, but what did he care for that so long as he had been given the benefit of the miss? For a moment he was puzzled to know how his pull on the cord could have effected so desirable a result, but upon an examination of the tackle he laughed aloud at the simplicity of the proposition. For want of something better to hold her end of the cord, Mary Darrell had tied it to the block of the derrick tackle, intending, of course, to draw up the basket again as soon as her starving guest had emptied it. Then, absorbed in a suddenly evolving plan for releasing him from his predicament, and at the same time preserving her father's secret, she had gone away and neglected to do so. Peveril was not slow to avail himself of the means of escape thus provided, and a few minutes later stood once more within the portal of the great cavern. His first care was to haul up the tackle and dispose it as he imagined it to have been left, with the attached cord hanging down the face of the cliff. "There," he said, when this was done to his satisfaction. "The young fellow is almost certain to come back for another look at me, and though I fancy he'll be somewhat surprised to find me gone, it will never enter his head that I am up here. Then, when he leaves, I will simply follow his lead, and so find the way out of this mysterious place. Perhaps, though, I can discover it for myself." Thus thinking, Peveril made as careful an examination of the cavern walls as the fading light would permit, but could find no sign of an opening. Finally, deciding to carry out his original plan, he selected a hiding-place, and, settling himself in as comfortably as possible, began to await with what patience he might the return of his young friend. By this time the cavern was quite dark, save for a dim twilight at its opening, and, having nothing to distract his attention, he began to realize how very weary he was after the exertions and nervous strain of the past 3 days. He had also just eaten a hearty meal. It is little wonder, then, that within 5 minutes, and in spite of his strenuous exertions to keep awake, he fell fast asleep. Fortunately he did not snore, nor make any sound to betray his presence, but, unfortunately, also his slumber was so profound that when, a little later, Mary Darrell and her father softly entered the gallery, and cautiously proceeded to its mouth for a look at the prisoner, whom they supposed still to be on the black ledge, he did not waken. Puzzled as they were at his disappearance, they were also greatly relieved to have him gone. They never for a moment imagined that he could have regained the cavern, and so, after drawing up the basket, they retired as they had come, leaving Peveril undisturbed to his nap. While it was not certain that the expected smuggling schooner would reach the coast that evening, she might do so, and with the cautiousness marking all of his operations, Ralph Darrell decided that it would not do for her cargo to be landed while there was a chance of a stranger, who was at the same time an enemy, being in the neighborhood. He felt assured that the young man who had so mysteriously appeared and disappeared that day must be an enemy, for though Mary had not mentioned his name, she had described him as being the one who had recently attempted to steal his logs from the landlocked basin. Now he had no doubt that the chap was a revenue officer who had come to spy out his smuggling operations, and only pretended to be in search of wrecked timber as a cloak for his real designs. Else why should he still hang around, and especially in the vicinity of the cavern, where there were no logs? Mary even declared a belief that he had been in their carefully concealed hiding-place, but of course she must be mistaken. Still, no more cargo must be landed until the spy was located and driven from that region. "I shan't need to carry on the business much longer," said the old man to himself, "but so long as I choose to remain in it I don't propose to be interfered with." So Mary was directed to go and display her lanterns at the mouth of the cavern as a signal that no goods were to be landed that night, while her father went out for the final look at his precious mining property that he took every evening just after the men had quit work. Ralph Darrell's heart was bound up in the new work he had recently began, and so anxious was he to push it that he was engaging all laborers who came that way. As yet his force was very small, but he was in hopes of speedily increasing it. Thus, to discover that 3 of his strongest men had suddenly thrown up their jobs and left him without warning filled him with anger. So furious was he, even after he entered the house, that poor Mary, who had just returned badly frightened from the cavern, dared not confess to him that, through her own carelessness, another stranger had been admitted to the hidden storehouse of the cliffs. Perhaps by morning this unwelcome visitor would have disappeared, as the other one had, and, at any rate, he could never find the secret passage, for it was too carefully concealed. By morning, too, her father would be restored to his ordinary frame of mind, and it would be easier to tell him what she had done, if, indeed, it should prove necessary to tell him at all. In the meantime, Mike Connell was much puzzled by the nature of the place in which he found himself after his climb, as well as by the abrupt disappearance of the lad upon whom he had counted for guidance. The darkness, with its accompanying profound silence, so affected him that, while he called several times, "Whist now! Where are you? Come out, that young feller, and have done with your fooling!" He did so in an awed tone, but little above a whisper. "All right, stay where you are, then," he added, after listening vainly for a reply. "If it's a game of hide and seek you want, I can soon accommodate you, seeing as how you've been so kind as to leave me a couple of glims, though it's only one of them I'll need." Thus saying, the newcomer removed one of the 2 lanterns that had been hung out as a warning to the smugglers, and unwittingly changed the danger signal into one of safety and invitation by doing so. With the lantern thus acquired to light his footsteps, he began a careful survey of the cavern, hoping to discover either an exit from it or his vanished guide. With his previous knowledge of the principal industry of that region, it did not take him long to conjecture the meaning of the bales and boxes upon which he soon stumbled. "Holy smoke!" he cried. "It's a cave of smugglers you've broke into, Mike Connell, no less, and a sorrowful time you'll have of it if the folks come home and catches you at the trespassing. Where the divil is the back door, I wonder, for the one in front is no good at all. Saints preserve us! What's that?" With this last exclamation the frightened Irishman began to retreat slowly backward, holding his lantern so that, while it revealed his own terror-stricken face, its light also fell full on the form of Richard Peveril, standing before him and staring in blankest amazement. "Plaze, good Mister Spook, I mean yer honor, oh, holy fathers, what will I say?" stammered the poor fellow in such faltering accents that Peveril broke into a roar of laughter. "Mike Connell!" he cried. "Wherever did you come from? And what has happened? You look as though you had seen a ghost." "And haven't I?" retorted the other, still staring dubiously. "Is it yourself, lad? But sure it must be, seeing you have a voice of your own, which is a thing never yet given to a spook. Glory be to goodness, Mister Peril, that I've found you just as I've lost you entirely, and meself as well." "But how do you happen to be here?" asked the still bewildered Peveril. "Sure, I just came, thinking you might want me." "Which way did you come?" "Through the front door, the same as yourself." "But I came in by a back entrance." "Then we'd best be getting out that way, for I'm afeared there'll soon be others here as won't be pleased to see us." "We can't, for that way is barred," answered Peveril. "But let us sit down and try to arrive at some understanding of this mysterious affair." So for nearly an hour the two talked over the situation, and though each frequently interrupted the other with questions or exclamations, they finally gained a pretty clear comprehension of their position. At the end of the conference Peveril exclaimed: "Then, so far as I can see, we are shut up here like two rats in a trap." "Yes," cried Connell, "and here comes the rat catchers after us now." As he spoke he pointed to the outer entrance, where the head and shoulders of a man had just appeared above the rocky ledge. Chapter 23.